The following is a presentation of Project Independence and WCWP. Project Independence is the Aging in Place initiative of the town of North Hempstead. We provide programs and services designed to assist and support the older town residents who wish to remain in their homes as they age. If we don't currently provide a service, we will try and connect you to that service. Call 311 or 869-6311 to get more information or receive services.
Welcome to Project Independence and You.
And welcome to WCWP.org, Project Independence and You, Senior Talk Radio. I will be your guest host today, Rebecca Miller, along with our co-host, Otto Los. How you doing, Otto?
Good morning, Rebecca. It's always a pleasure to be with you. As
you too. And Christina Liu, who is the radio show producer extraordinaire, every single show, now getting toward our 10th year, which is unbelievable. Christina does a great job. So our guest today is the Honorable Teresa Corrigan. She's the supervising judge of the county court and acting Supreme Court justice. I want to thank you so much for giving us, an hour of your time. And we have a lot of questions, and you've been gracious enough to answer all of them, as you told us in the beginning. And I know that Otto actually wanted to talk a little bit about how he knows you.
Well, yes. I know this young lady for quite a long time now, actually. She's one of my daughter's best friends, I would say. I have attended many basketball games with their children and other sporting events where they couldn't even reach the basket. So that's how far back it goes. And they are, both of your children now are in college, I believe.
They are.
And as is my grandson, Nick, who played ball with your son. So I just wanted to go into full disclosure about that. And my daughter actually worked with Terry. I'll call you that since, the Honorable Terry. Since 2012, I guess, when you were running for judge, my daughter was actually quite involved with you as a novice campaign manager, if you will. And the two of you were kind of novice at that whole thing. And you succeeded mightily. So you did a great job. And, I just wanted to tell people I know you and that you are a decent human being with a great family. And we can go from there,
Thank you so much.
You're a judge. You're also a human being, mother, homemaker, get involved with all kinds of other things, go to church. I see you in there once in a while. Not that we don't go, we just go at a different time. And so that's the story. That's the full disclosure.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Otto. And again, we're just so happy to have you here. And, we were kind of talking before about, the impact of COVID. I mean, COVID's hit every worldwide sector of life, from education and healthcare, and law enforcement, court, entertainment, restaurants. I mean, you could just go on and on. I don't think there's any area in life that hasn't been impacted in some way. And, one of the ways we really were interested in talking to you about is how it's impacted the court system. We were thinking, what happened early on? Once March came, I know for government, by March 16, that was that Monday, it was the Monday after Friday the 13th. I thought I'd mention how, it followed Friday the 13th. We all went home. We just all started working from home. We all, hunkered down. Things changed drastically, immediately, from food shopping to all the things that we had to do to make sure we, contain whatever we can contain this unknown at the time, virus. So, but the court system seems to have to go on. I mean, it just seems, there's so many things that depend on the legal system and people that are, waiting on answers and hearings. So what was happening in the beginning for the court system?
First, let me just say thank you so much for having me on today. I really do appreciate it. And thank you, Otto, for that very kind introduction and disclosure. I'm very happy that you said I'm a mother and I'm a homemaker and I'm all those things first, because truly that's what I am first. Yes, I'm a judge and that's my job, but I never forget that, you know, it's family first, and it always has to be family first. And then we do the best we can with the jobs we're given. So with regards to COVID and the court system, back in March, I remember it very clearly. It was March 17th, and I was all decked out in my green Irish regalia for the day. And we were notified on that day that the courts would be shutting down the very next day, the 18th. But we never really actually shut down. What that meant was all of the courts of Nassau County, and there are many. So we have a family court in Nassau County. We have a matrimonial court in Nassau County. We have my court, which is the felony criminal court, we're called the county court. There's the Supreme Court that handles all civil matters. And there's a district court that handles lesser felonies plus landlord-tenant, plus a lot of other civil courts. All 5 of those courts were technically shutting down. All the judges were going home, as was all of the court staff, except for the bare minimum to keep us operational. So what happened was, my court building is the largest court building of the courts here in the county. So what happened was, on March 18th, we moved 4 other courts into the county court. So overnight, we literally cleaned out courtrooms and chambers to make space for all of my colleagues so that every court would be operational out of one building. Because at that point, we weren't really up on the whole social distancing thing. That was sort of new. So we thought the best thing to do, and we got guidance from the health department, was to bring everyone together into one location, which is what we ended up doing. A big part of what happens in Nassau County, which is really not known to many people, there's a statute that does not allow many parts of the Nassau County courts to be virtual. So what we're doing right now was not authorized by law for Nassau County courts. So we couldn't just jump on to this virtual setting. We had no electronics to jump on to a virtual setting. So we needed the governor to give us permission to do that. And thankfully he did. So within a week's time, we became a fully virtual system from a system that had never even been allowed to be virtual.
So it took 1 month. It was just a month before you were all up virtually?
We were all up virtually within fully virtual within the month of March. So in those 2 weeks, but quite frankly, within a week, we were up and running. We had some equipment that we were allowed to do it right away,
right?
But it wasn't sufficient. But within, our tech people were amazing. They had to do 5 courts, and they all had to do it in one building. And it was insanity, but we got it done, and barely a blip on the radar screen for the most important cases. I mean, there are people that definitely did not get their day in court in March. But
you say virtual, was it virtual within the building, or were you working out of homes?
So I came in, and there was 1 judge from each of the 5 courts that came in, but the rest of the judges were home and virtual from home. So there was very few people physically in the building. I had myself, a clerk, 2 clerks. We had the head clerk here who was responsible for the entire building. We had a couple of support staff, but the idea was to have as few people as possible physically in the building, and everyone was going virtual from home.
Now, when you have felonies and there's a criminal involved who may be in a jail somewhere, they normally would be transported to a court. How did you work that out? Were you able to see the prisoners virtually?
So initially, because the jail did not have virtual capabilities, again, because it wasn't authorized by law for Nassau County, And just as an aside, once the executive orders go away, if the legislature doesn't pick up this topic, we can't do it again. But with the executive order in place, we eventually got equipment into the jail. So by the third week to the fourth week of March, we were able to see all of those prisoners virtually. But for a short period of time, we had to produce them, which was likewise problematic. We didn't want to produce them. The jail was having a spike like everybody was having a spike.
Do you think that maybe the elimination of transporting prisoners might happen, because now you can all of a sudden virtually see the prisoner? You know what I'm saying? I know there's a whole big deal about transporting prisoners. Who does it? And, you know, it's a costly proposition and all of the above.
Right.
What do you visualize as the future for that?
So we can't completely eliminate transportation of prisoners to the court system, especially in the criminal, obviously in the felony criminal world. The statutes and the Constitution is written that they are entitled to face-to-face confrontations with their accusers. So we can't wipe that away. Brooklyn has probably for close to 20 years now, they've had virtual prisoner production in a courtroom forever. They were a pilot project when I was an assistant district attorney in Brooklyn. So they've been doing it forever. Again, Nassau County doesn't even have the legal right to do it except for the governor's executive order, unless the statute changes. So it will never be completely wiped away. And if that executive order goes away, we won't be able to do it, even though we know it's now beneficial for certain things. It's beneficial for a conference. It's beneficial for, just discussing the case, but there's not going to be any sort of hearing. There's not going to be a trial. It's very beneficial to have the ability to have the prisoner produced virtually. And a lot of times the prisoners want to be produced virtually, because otherwise they have to get up at 5 a.m. to get ready to be in court for 9:30. So it's a good thing if we can make it happen, but it cannot happen on a regular basis for hearings and trials, because the statute and the Constitution gives them the right to face-to-face in-person confrontation.
And also speedy trial, right? They have the right to.
Unfortunately, speed is a word we're going to put in quotes right now. Yes, they're entitled to a speedy trial. The governor's executive orders have somewhat put that on hold. Speedy trial time only kicked in again for the court system on November 4th.
So what happened then weeks later? What were the things, because you said at the time we didn't really recognize social distancing as kind of a rule at that point. When did that start coming in, and how did that then start impacting again, some of the changes that were going on?
So I would say by April, we had a very good handle on limiting movement around the building, limiting contact with everyone. So in the beginning, where we were all here in the building and we pretty much moving around freely, by the beginning of April, the freedom of movement was very restricted, although we were still all in this courthouse. But mask wearing was always required, but that was strictly enforced. And the different court parts remained within their designated spaces that we provided them within the building. So that worked out very well. And no one from the public was allowed in at that point in time. So the building was shut down to the public. If you were not an employee, you were not coming into the building.
How long did that go on, that no public could come in?
So the public didn't start really coming back into the building until around the end of May, beginning of June. And that's the point in time where we spread out the courts back to their own buildings. So by the middle of May, we started moving family court back to family court in Westbury. We moved district court back to their building in Hempstead. The matrimonial center went back across the street. Supreme went back across the street. So by June 1, we were in a very good place. Judges were starting to come back from being home. they were able to be in the building. People were starting to come back. I think we were allowed to go to like 50% capacity at that point. So, by the middle of May, we were spreading people out and then slowly starting to allow the reopening of the buildings to foot traffic. June 1, foot traffic was allowed in.
How about, you mentioned at the break, we talked about speedy trial. How did it impact the backlog of trials that, crime doesn't stop or things don't stop just because COVID came along? In some cases, it probably increases. So you wind up with so many cases, and in order to give people speedy trials, it's almost physically impossible, as I see it. How did that affect the backlog?
So the backlog, unfortunately, is still the backlog. But some of the things we were able to do, and this was with the assistance of Madeline Singus and the district attorney's office in conjunction with the jail and the defense bar, who really, all the parties stepped up. It was very much a unified joint effort to try to protect everyone's rights during this unique and completely unique time. What happened first and foremost, there were a lot of people in jail on cases that maybe they didn't need to necessarily be there because they didn't have a violent background, or they were a little elderly, or they had a health risk. So in the early stages, March, April, even parts of May, there was a full review of all of the criminal cases pending here in Nassau County. And any individual who was incarcerated that could be let out, because we knew we weren't going to be getting to their trials anytime soon, they were released. Now, if those individuals, upon being released, committed crimes, and unfortunately, I'm aware of two, they were reincarcerated upon recommitting crimes. But the other individuals who did not recommit crimes, they were able to get out and stay out. So that greatly reduced the population within the jail. So remaining in the jail were violent criminals with significant charges against them. Unfortunately, this is just the reality of the situation. There were no trials and there were no hearings between March and June. Even in June, we weren't able to do trials or hearings. July, we started the process of getting grand juries back because we hadn't even had grand juries. Now, those are the 23 people that sit to determine if a person who's been charged with a crime should be held for a trial. So there were people arrested and charged with a crime sitting in jail. And the normal procedure is within 7 days of that arrest and being placed in jail, if a grand jury has decided you should be held for charges. They were held for months without that process. So we needed to get that process back in place. Now, there was a safety net. I was reviewing every one of those cases personally as a supervising judge with the attorneys, and we were making a joint decision based on all of our experience whether this individual would likely be indicted by a grand jury, whether there was good cause to keep the person in, whether we had enough legal basis to hold them without a grand jury having reviewed the evidence, because we were in the middle of a pandemic. Right. So there was something that was protecting them anyway, but it wasn't until October that we got back to grand juries and civil juries. And it wasn't until November, just recently, that we got back to criminal juries. So speedy trial was not happening and unfortunately is not happening, but we are doing everything to protect those individuals' rights given the unique circumstance that we're currently in.
Now, during that whole process, there were no jury trials, I would assume, because people who would be jurists, if you will, couldn't go into court because of COVID. You didn't have anything where you could be a jurist in the jury and wear a mask or any of that. In other words, there were no juries.
The main reason there were no juries is because the Department of Health was telling us it was too dangerous to bring that number of people together. It was just too dangerous, and safety had to come first for everybody, for the litigants, for the public, for the judges, for the defendants. Safety first. So we couldn't bring anyone in because CDC and the health department said, don't do it. Eventually, I reconfigured this courthouse to allow for grand juries socially distanced, and to allow for petit juries, which is trial juries, to be socially distanced. So we got it. We were there. We were able to figure it out. We reconfigured all of these courtrooms.
Just a basic question then, maybe there's no simple answer. How do you determine if a jury should be involved with a case? What's the, what takes place there? How do I know as a law person whether there's going to be a jury trial or not?
So there's the statute tells us for lower level crimes, for B misdemeanors and below, for the most part, there are not juries. For A misdemeanors, which means you cannot be sentenced to more than 1 year of incarceration. That's the A misdemeanor threshold. You can have a jury, but it's a jury of 6. For any felony charge, you as the person charged, the accused, you have a right to a jury trial. It's 12 people. You always have alternates in case somebody gets sick. But if you as the defendant, if you right now were sitting incarcerated and you wanted a trial, we cannot give you a jury trial right now because we've been shut down again, but we can give you what's called a bench trial. But you as the accused would have to be the one that says, Madam Judge, Mr. Judge, can you please be the person who hears the evidence in my case? And can you please be the fact finder? That's normally the jury's job, in addition to the person who deals with the law. So the judge themselves becomes the jury in a bench trial. We can do that right now. Not many people that are accused want the judge to make the determination about the facts. We have too much experience. They'd rather their peers make that determination.
Yeah, they would probably, a juror, I have been on a jury, and it becomes more emotional, your personal likes, dislikes, and maybe not the law.
Exactly. And that's why most accused want a jury of their peers. They don't want a judge who's been doing their job for, a couple of decades to be the one deciding the facts. We as judges are supposed to be able to weave through the antics, the emotions, the gamesmanship, right? So that's good for the judge. That's maybe not so good for the person who's accused. They want the jury to be involved emotionally. They want the jury to be involved in in deciding whether this evidence is good, whether this person was telling the truth, whether this law enforcement officer did the right thing.
Maybe the jurors would have a little bit more empathy because they're not legally tied into it, and you can kind of relate, and it's easier to relate in that way. So where are we today now that cases are going up and it's looking like things are shutting down, and are the courts yet again now have to go back a few steps?
Unfortunately, we have gone back a few steps, but again, safety first. Everything Chief Judge DeFior does is based on the safety and well-being of everyone involved in the court system. So we were excited to have one criminal trial get held here. It started November 10th. It was finished by the following week. It went off without a hitch for the most part. The jury was successfully picked, socially distanced. We had face masks and face shields for everybody, because in a criminal case, you can't cover a person's face and determine their credibility. You have to be able to see the person's face. So we would give them a face shield that was see-through so you could see their face. And we had plexiglass and distancing and markings on the floor, and it went so well. And then unfortunately, the numbers really started to spike again throughout the state. And the chief judge felt it was more important, again, to keep everyone safe than to push trials through and to push grand juries through. So trials have been shut down. Again, we are not calling in any citizens of Nassau County for trial jury service. We have one grand jury that's still sitting. They will finish their work. Their last day will be next Wednesday, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then they will be done. And we will not call in citizens for grand jury duty for the immediate future. And we're going to wait, and we're going to follow the science and listen to the health department experts, and all of the experts related to health.
You've given us a wealth of information on all the precautions and how you're keeping everybody safe in the court system. It's just so multi-leveled and just an incredible task, an undertaking to, both protect everybody and also be able to take care of the law as well. So we're really grateful for this information. And, we're kind of interested a little bit in you, too. I know Otto was very interested in hearing about some things.
Well, yeah, actually. Did you just wake up when you were born and say, I want to be in law? What led you down that path going back?
So I was always known as a talkative child. And even through grammar school and high school, I was always speaking up for the person that I saw that I thought might have been getting a raw deal or was too afraid to speak up for themselves. So I had always had a speaking desire. And then when I went to college, and if anyone had heard my speech when I was inducted as a judge, they will have known this, so I'm not saying anything that isn't already out there. But when I went to college and met up with a great group of new friends, sometimes people do stupid things in college, and a few of my friends landed in front of a couple of judges there up in Albany County. And I went to court to sort of help them out and make sure they could get home in the morning. And I watched this wonderful judge in Albany County just show amazing compassion towards foolish college students. And I watched the prosecutor and the defense do their job. And I knew by the time I got to college, I was going to be a lawyer. And I knew at that moment it was going to be a criminal lawyer because I wanted to be one of those people in the room. And initially, I just wanted to be the prosecutor. So when I went to law school, I knew that criminal law was going to be my expertise or my forte. And I ended up going straight from law school to the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office way back when in 1989. And I was there for almost 16 and a half years before I moved out to Nassau County and then became assistant district attorney under Kathleen Rice. She was the district attorney at that point. And I did that for about 6 years. And then I was lucky enough to be considered for a judgeship, which Otto's daughter did run my campaign. We were two complete novices, not having a clue, but there we were knocking on doors throughout Nassau County. And I was fortunate enough to have the voters of Nassau County vote for me. And back in 2013, in January, I was sworn in to be a county court criminal judge.
It's funny. I look back and I realize you and my daughter are now getting older. You're in your 50s now.
We are.
All of a sudden you have a lot of experience. And, like Bernadette became a doctor not long ago. So I'm thinking, oh my God, these people are getting old. I said, what?
We're catching up.
But we still look good, right?
Yes. I have a question that's a little off the track here. It has to do with face masks. You said that people, when they're in a trial, cannot have a face mask. How does that work? And I'm not knocking any religion when I bring this up, but some religions, you have to have a face mask. Basically, your face is covered. Are they forced to uncover their face, or how does that work?
So if they come in as a potential juror, it is possible under the law that they can be excused from jury service because their religious beliefs prevent them from being able to follow some of the laws here that are in place. One of them being, we need to see your face if you're going to be considered as a juror.
Right.
So we haven't had that situation yet, I have to say. We have had people be completely cooperative with the understanding that we just need to see your face while you're being questioned about whether or not you can be a juror. Once you're picked, that's no problem. If your religion requires your face to be covered, your face can be covered. It's just to see you, to determine your credibility while you're being questioned by the attorneys or while you're being questioned by the judge. Now, if you're the accused or a witness to the accused, we have to really work with you as closely as we can to protect and respect your religious rights. But we have to see your face to determine credibility in these cases. So it's a difficult balance. We work it out. We do work it out, but it is a difficult balance.
It's interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yeah.
You have to, like, every avenue you have to have covered in some way. I mean, do things still come up that you're like, oh, we've never experienced this before, or this is anything come to mind that was kind of like out of the unusual? I don't know, where there's no precedence for it.
Every day I feel like we have something come up that we're like, oh, we didn't think that through, or, oh, that's a new twist. It could be almost anything. A big thing, some people with face shields and face masks, there are people that have doctor excuses to not be covered. We can't let you in the courthouse, but the courthouse is open to the public. How do we go about doing that? It's very difficult. So in that situation, we'll give you a face shield because you're not going to, so at least there's some protection. And what we've had to do is sort of clear the path, right? Make sure there's really nobody.
Right.
We go more than 6 feet, right? Sort of clear the path to help this person. Or if it's somebody, we can stop at the front door and say, maybe we can help you virtually. Give us the information. Go ahead, go home. Don't come in because you can't wear a face mask, and we're not going to force you to, but you can't come in without one. We'll give us your number, give us your information. We'll help you virtually. We come up with whatever unique solution we can find. But there's something every day. In the beginning, there was something every minute.
Right.
That we didn't think of.
Could you describe?
So this is kind of out of left field.
Is there such a thing as what's your typical day?
My typical day. So my typical day is a little different because I'm the supervising judge from the regular judge's typical day. So for me, my typical day is when I get here at 9 o'clock, I make sure nothing changed overnight. Because in March, April, and May, literally things were changing overnight, and my directives were changing overnight just to keep on top of the illness. So the first thing I do is I check all the state websites to make sure there's no new orders from the governor. There's nothing from Chief Judge DeFiore. I speak with my supervisor, a wonderful, wonderful man, the administrative judge of Nassau County. His name is Norman St. George, the Honorable Norman St. George. He's wonderful. I check with him every morning just to make sure things are, nothing new has come in overnight. And then what I need to do is I make sure all of the judges have all of their equipment, that everything's running correctly, that all the courtrooms are running correctly, whether it's a virtual courtroom or what we call a live courtroom, although now that's being shut down again, but the virtual courtrooms are running. And then my job is to make sure all of those really old cases that are clogged up in the system, that can't be getting resolved at this time. It's my job to make sure I speak to the defense attorney, the prosecution, and those accused, those defendants, to keep them apprised of where we're at with their cases being resolved. I try to work out a disposition if I can work out a disposition. I try to make sure that everyone understands why they're stuck in the position they're stuck in. So I'm in charge of all of what we call the really old cases that are in the system. And then by the afternoon, I'm always in touch with all of my judges to make sure they know what's going on. I'm troubleshooting every complaint that there is, along with my chief clerk, Donald Vetter, who's phenomenal at keeping this place working and running well. So my day, it really varies. I'm administrative, but I also get to do the legal stuff with all of the old cases. So I have a very varied day, where my judges, their day is their cases. They're working through their cases virtually on a regular basis.
Is that every day that they have cases, judges do?
All of my judges are in every day, and every day they have what we call a calendar of cases, so a listing of cases that are on, and every day they are virtually conferencing those cases. If they work out a plea of guilty with the attorneys and the accused, they'll take that plea of guilty. If somebody's already pled guilty and needs to be sentenced, they'll be sentenced. So they are working every day on their cases. No case is just sitting there with no one touching it. Every case is being worked on every day.
Okay.
Kind of a question out of left field. Oh, if I might. Otto, you have another question?
No, go ahead. Your turn.
I was just going to say, when we were talking about kind of the unusual things that are happening in court and every day, a lot of people have supportive pets. They have to bring a pet on an airplane. They have pets that help them, seeing eye dogs, things like that. What are the rules in court?
All right. So interestingly, one of my judges has a pet, has a diabetes dog. One of my judges is a very severe diabetic, type 1 diabetic, and he has his dog, beautiful, beautiful. I think it's a golden doodle named Barney. Barney is with that judge every day. Barney sits under the bench when that judge is on trial. Barney goes everywhere with that judge. The court does not tell service animals that they're not allowed in. Service animals are allowed into the courthouse as long as it's a legitimate service animal. What we don't allow is the person who walks up to the front door with their small, pocketbook dog, and they say, I have anxiety and this dog helps me. We have to draw the line somewhere. If your dog doesn't come almost with a prescription, that's not the right word for it, but if your dog doesn't come a truly authorized medically for you, then we can't let the animal in. But otherwise, service animals are allowed in like everybody else.
Interesting.
Okay. Back in your past, you were very involved with gangs. And gangs on Long Island, everybody knows there's one big gang that creates some havoc. Does that calm down at all during COVID, or does it get worse? Do you see cases coming in related to the gangs? Because I would think they get to criminal court for the most part. What's the action like as far as that goes right now?
Surprisingly, I will say during March, April, and even a good part of May, violent crime was pretty low in Nassau County. We didn't see a lot of violent crime, and arrests were down in Nassau County. I don't know if a study was done to determine if that's because people were home or for some other reason. I will say, I think with no surprise to anybody, domestic violence rose during the COVID lockdown. I think that's pretty obvious as to why that would occur. But the gangs kind of took a break. It was a nice breath of fresh air. So we did have a few months of reduced, it never goes away, but we had a few months of reduced violent criminal activity during COVID. Again, I can't tell you why. I didn't really do the study to know if that's because the cops were so busy with everything else they weren't making those arrests, or whether those people were hunkered down themselves and not going out and about. I don't know.
The other night I was involved with a program called Project Help, and on that panel was Arlene Markarian from the Assistant District Attorney's Office. And there was a lot of talk about mental health problems during COVID, which comes in all shapes and sizes. And a lot of it is family on family, people who have addictions, mental health problems to begin with. And how do, you know, you get cases like that that come through the court. How do you handle those kind of cases? They seem like they would be difficult. You know, do you incarcerate people who you know have problems? You know, the path of, I think the term that was used the other night, which I liked, I'm going to have to read it, was the need for therapeutic housing. There is no therapeutic housing right now. So I was just curious, like, where does the court try to direct those kind of cases?
So fortunately, this court, at least in Nassau County, we do work very closely with the district attorney's office and the defense bar to try to get non-incarcerated help to anybody who needs it. So these types of cases where there's mental health as a genesis for the criminal activity, you know, or addiction as the genesis for criminal activity, there are many, many programs that the district attorney has put together that allows these individuals to get help before they get incarceration, with the hope that they never have to be incarcerated. So there are programs there. Unfortunately, there is not, a single place to send these individuals for their therapy. That would be wonderful. It does not exist. At least not here in the county. I'm not really aware of it in many places, at least in the lower part of New York State. I'm not sure about upstate. But we as the judges, we're not going to get in the way for the most part. If the defense attorney and the prosecution work something out where they come to the judge together and they say, Johnny Jones, the defendant, hit his mom, but he had a mental breakdown. Mom wants him to get better. Johnny Jones wants to get better. The family wants him to get better. And we've got this program that is willing to take him. Will you let him go there? The answer is yes. His case will remain open. We as the court may require him to plead guilty to something up front, but we leave him out and they go into the program. And as long as that accused, Johnny Jones, as long as he's doing the right thing, we will let him take as long as he needs to get better. If he doesn't, we have the leverage then, because we usually require them to plead guilty, we'll have the leverage of incarcerating if we need to. You can get services while you're incarcerated, but everyone knows services outside the incarceration system are always better for everybody involved. So we do work with all of the agencies to try to get those people the mental health help that they need.
Well, like Project Independence, one of the things about Project Independence is nurses and social workers get involved with families, and they could tell if a senior is being abused. What does that mean? That's a long topic by itself, because there's so many different kinds of abuse. But Project Independence has been great at trying to direct people to programs like the Family and
Children's,
yeah.
Family and Children's Administration or Association. Yes. They're wonderful.
Yeah, and there are a lot of programs out there, and I think it's teamwork that's required between the legal system and the social system and all the various groups, the charities, if you will. They're not charities. I don't like to use that word because people look at it as like a freebie that they're giving somebody. They're really people who are trying to help other people, and it requires an effort by all of these people. And I've learned a lot in the last couple of months about the fact that there is good communication between agencies and the legal system. And I don't think people realize how much goes on behind the scenes to try to help people and keep them out of jail. That doesn't fix anything. But a wish list that came up the other night was the need for therapeutic housing, which a judge has nothing to do with. But just socially as a society, we used to have therapeutic housing, but it was debatable as to how good it was. They were more like prisons in some respects. I think we've learned a lot, and I think if we ever went back to therapeutic housing, they would be run differently. But that's a little bit of a philosophical bringing out here.
But I do agree with you, Otto, that, times have changed. In the past, prosecutors' offices were known for putting people in jail. Judges were known for what kind of sentence did you give the person. That has thankfully greatly changed. And now there is a recognition, I think, throughout that it's not all about can I prove this person's guilt and what kind of sentence can he get? Everyone really is trying to look a little deeper. Now, don't get me wrong. There are individuals where the only question should be, can I prove their guilt and what kind of sentence should they get? That exists. But there are many cases where a change was needed. And I think the change is happening, and many of the district attorneys throughout New York State are embracing this desire to not necessarily incarcerate everyone, but to get to the root cause, to see if there is some sort of justice that can be served that doesn't necessarily require people to go to jail or people to go to prison. And the judges are embracing that also, as long as we keep the community safe and as long as justice is served and as long as the victims of these crimes feel that justice has been served. I think programs and alternatives to incarceration is a great move.
You know, Terry, and something else with the seniors that just seems to be exploding. It's always been around, but it hasn't been at this volume, and it's so sneaky. It's the incredible amount of scams that are out there. Preying on everybody. I mean, we all get calls every day, scams and car warranties and trips and call Social Security. And are any of these people ever caught? And do you ever see them? I mean, there's financial crimes that bankrupt seniors who are isolated, living, in their home in their 90s. And from contractors coming to the door and saying they'll repair the roof, just give me $500 and they leave, to more financial scheming, stealing your private information stuff. Is there a huge increase in it, and has it grown since COVID, or it just changed direction? What do you guys see in the court system?
So I actually do have several cases that are assigned to me now because they're a little bit older. I have one telephone scam case, which just breaks my heart. A senior gave over several $1,000s because they thought their grandson was under arrest and bail money was needed. I have another case where a professional took significant money from several seniors under a refinancing mortgaging scheme. We don't see it a lot. And let me say to the seniors, there's a thought out there that the seniors are embarrassed to say that they were taken advantage of. Please don't be embarrassed. You have the right to the potential to get that money back. It won't always happen, but we need to know if this happens to you. These crimes are out there. These horrible people are out there. And when we can, when the DA's offices can prosecute them, they will. But they can't prosecute them if they're not aware of them. And these people are very savvy. They have several layers within their phone dialing system, so you can't quite get to them on a direct check of a phone call. But please, and seniors, if your grandson's incarcerated, someone in your family is going to tell you that. A stranger isn't going to tell you that. Wait for the family member to tell you that. Believe me, they will let you know. A stranger doesn't need to let you know. If your roof needs fixing, they're not going to know that from standing in your front door and looking up. There has to be something more done. Please don't feel like you have to be nice to all these people that knock on your door. It's okay to slam the door in their face if you need to. Just please.
There's so many different types of scams, and they really prey on seniors because, like you were saying, seniors, they don't like to report it, and they're scared. If you could just call the police, on this, there's a lot of times they're caretakers that are, taking care of them forever and ever. And the whole time they've been draining accounts and things like that. But you can call the police. You can be protected. It's really unfortunate. Not too long ago, I heard just a couple got schemed. Someone wrote a note and said something like, "Oh, I love the paint color of your house. Here's my phone number. Please call me. I can't find it." They call the person. She's like, will you guys be home in like an hour, or, I'll come by. And they're, couple said, no, we're both at work. You know, can you come later today? And she's like, of course. So the house was robbed because they just told them no one was home. You know, it's like you just can't, you know, unfortunately you can't trust anybody, but the scams come in just so many directions. And just when we get on top of it and we know it's a scam, the next one's coming out, you know.
You know, we've had a lot of shows about scams, and we always try with Christina later in the next segment to enforce or reinforce positive thinking. But I believe there's a time where negative thinking is required.
Right.
You know, that is whenever you get any action that you had nothing to do with generating, be skeptical. You're allowed to be skeptical. You're allowed, as Terry said, close the door. Say no. When they put time pressure on you,
right.
Get lost, you know. Right. Give me your phone number. Give me all your information. Maybe I'll get back to you. Or send me something in the mail. Even that's not a good idea because then they have your address. But, you know, you can't be afraid to say no and be skeptical. Be negative.
Right. Say, my son's a police officer. I'm going to call him first. And then if it's good, I'll definitely do it. Just, you know, say anything. You got to, you know, come up with ways to protect yourself. It's really, you have to protect yourself. And that's a positive thing.
Absolutely.
They're pros. They're smooth talking pros.
Yeah.
And that's what they do for a living. They steal and they scam people.
And then they come before us and say, we didn't realize, we didn't know, but we're not falling for that.
Yeah.
So again, not a lot of cases, I guess, thankfully, although I know there's a lot of it going on. So again, I'm concerned that people are afraid to report it.
Well, it's glad to know that, you know, there are cases coming to court and people are getting prosecuted for it. So, you know, eventually, hopefully there'll be some resolution. But thank you so much, Terry, for all this wonderful information. I'm sure we'll have you back. And, you know, thanks again for giving us your time. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.